Afternoon, Chris. Long time no speak. How you doing?
Doing great. How you doing?
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us on the monthly April Q&A. We're a little bit delayed this month because there was a few things on the burner there that we wanted to wait for, and obviously you were doing a bit of travel, so glad we could line this up. Sunny day in Vancouver. Uh, we're into Q2, well into Q2. Been lots of good advancements on the blockchain. The white paper is moving. Lots of things to get excited about, but everybody wants to hear it from you, the co-creator, the founder, the co-founder of Flash. So if you can give us a bit of an update on where you see things, and we'll take it from there. We've got a few questions, but we'll get there. We'll try to keep it under an hour, and yeah. All right, over to you.
Perfect. So we made a lot of progress on we've got a big blockchain upgrade that they're still working on that. We've got probably half of our team working on that right now. And this is to get us up to the latest Bitcoin blockchain, Litecoin code base. And we found a couple things that we wanted to change, so it's been rolled back. Didn't affect there's no effect on any transaction processing or anything. But that's been our first priority, is just to get that finished, and they should have that done probably, I'm going to guess it's probably within the next week or so. The second thing that's actually really big is the new white paper, and we've been spending, as you can imagine, a lot of time on that. This includes the gov nodes, and so what we've actually decided to do, a number of us, and we want to put it out to the community and see what everybody in the community thinks about it. But it's to have a stake node. Now, this is very similar to the concept of the gov node, where there are 151 nodes up to that maximum number. There will be a maximum of 25 mining nodes. And the way that we're setting this up, and this is probably going to be the meat and potatoes of the call here today, the way that we're setting this up is that there will be 50 permanent delegates. So these are people who don't have to run for election. 101 are open to election. And then we have, who's going to be a permanent delegate? Well, for example, the foundation. Those are some of them. And those are actually, we're going to use this as kind of a fundraiser. We've already raised about 36 Bitcoins. And so we've got 14, if we'd sold it for 1 Bitcoin per node, we have 14 left. And those were sold to people like a year ago. So let's say that we sold it for 1.5 or 2 Bitcoins per node. You'd automatically be one of these delegates. You'd still have to stake. The staking right now, it looks like it's going to be around 1 million. And then if you want to mine, it's going to be probably another 1 million or 2 on top of that. So the way the economics are going to work is that this is where everyone's now, getting their pencil out. Keep in mind, Flash does not have any inflation. All the coins were distributed. They're all out there. There's no new coins coming out. There's no slush fund like a lot of the other ones have. And as a result of that, you now have a number of different approaches that you're kind of limited to. So the first thing is, because we can't give away free coins because we're not creating anymore, that's what Bitcoin does. And Bitcoin pays out about $18 million a day to the miners. So our model is different. So what we have is we have transaction fees, and then we have a donated pool. And the donated pool are going to be coins that we're going to collect from the community, and these are going to be paid out for the first year to the miners. So we're going to put in, a bunch of the whales have gotten together and said, yeah, we want to do this because it's going to support the coin. 12 million Flash, and the total is about 32,000 per day, plus the transaction fees. Now, the way the transaction fees in the pool are going to be divided, 50% are going to go to the miners, and 50% are going to go to the other delegates. So it's a nice little thing. You stake some coins. You can stake more than 1 million. You can stake 10 million. If you have 10 million Flash, you can do that. There are going to be people who don't, who don't have 1 million, and this is your chance. Go and get them, because the price right now is it's not as high as it's been in the past, And you have to do the math and figure out what you think is going to happen. But a lot of these kind of staking models have been very, very successful. So that's the big news, and there's a lot of technical behind the scenes for that. And so that's been what's been taking the time. But we've got a number of the engineers who've been working on this and come up with a very simple and straightforward way to do it. It'll all be done with a Qt wallet. It'll all be the Qt wallet will have, you'll be able to vote with the Qt wallet. Anybody can vote for delegates. All you have to do is put coins in the Qt wallet and vote. And at the time of the vote, you have to when the votes are actually counted, they'll go and there's a mechanism that will go through and check to make sure that the people aren't double voting with the coins and things like that. And then once the votes are in, then the delegates become active, and it's the same wallet. You just say, I want to become a delegate. I have this many coins. I have the minimum to stake. And what will end up happening is that people will be able to take those wallets, and the delegates will be able to vote on things. Now, they can vote on the two things they can vote on are obviously the software updates, and then also who are going to be the miners. And that's what they get to vote on. So it's really, what we have a delegated governance. We're actually trying to figure out a good name for this kind of process, but it's really delegated governance there is proof of stake, but there's also proof of work. So it's a consensus model is really what it is. And what we're doing right now is we're going through, and I've got some very smart people going through and looking at all the different angles for how can someone take it over? Is it good if someone takes it over? All those kind of things, because even Bitcoin can be taken over. So if you get 75%, you can take it over. The chances are it's not going to happen, and it's uneconomic for someone to do it. And that's really the idea, is that you want this to be a distributed community coin. So that's the big news on the white paper. There's a lot of other things that are going to go in the white paper. To me, probably the most exciting news for Flash was we had a very successful test the last couple weeks with this is the human ATM. And what we're doing now is the test was we basically lent some of the whales lent some Flash to a person in Venezuela, and he is in the process of setting up a network where they're going to be doing trades between Flash and the local currency. And what's important about this is that you are not dependent on a bank or a licensed exchange. In a lot of countries, this is going to be a very, very important thing to do. So, for example, in India, where the central bank just said it's not okay for banks to deal with crypto companies or with crypto, now it's going to push it all out on the street. Now, how big can this be? Well, to give you an example, when I was there with James in Bangalore late last year, the issue for people is, how do you get around in India? Well, use a tuk-tuk, use a taxi. They're all over the place. And there's some cars too, and bikes and people, cows, things like that. But what people end up doing is they take these things, and Uber has been very successful in Bangalore. They have 100,000 Uber drivers in Bangalore alone, probably more than that, maybe twice that much. These are the people who I think as they drive around, they're going to be looking for trades. And that is, now that we have this model pretty much figured out, the next step is to refine it and to automate that. And the next step for the automation is with the Flash Android wallet. So there are some developers who were working on, and they basically got the first two versions of that wallet out. And then the next thing that's happening is that we have a couple of updates. I went through and built a wireframe that I think is going to make it one of the most elegant and simple to use wallets. The other thing is they've added, besides Flash, we now have Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Dash. And we'll be adding a couple more different coins in there as well. But the next step after this, which I think is only going to take a few more weeks, is to add a discovery and personal trading screen to that Android wallet. Keep in mind, in countries like India, Venezuela, Latin America, all over the place, most of the world where you have, countries that are developing, don't have a lot of resources, don't have a lot of money, they can't afford the iPhone. Now, of course, there are people in the country who can't afford the iPhone, but most people can't, and so they're on Android. So what ends up happening is the Android is going to be probably the best approach for us. The other thing is we turned in the iOS application. We have an iOS application that was developed as well, and Apple rejected it because they said, well, Flash isn't on our approved list of cryptocurrencies. And there's a list of maybe 8 or 10 cryptocurrencies that are approved by Apple. And that includes the DAO, which of course was a notorious scam coin that the SEC basically slapped down, and that was approved by Apple. So it just doesn't make any sense. I think what happens with Apple is that we'll just keep going back to them, and eventually they'll do it, or maybe we just won't care about Apple. Android is probably, in these markets, 90% of the market. So it's possible that someone, even if they have an iPhone, they could just go out and buy an Android phone for $50 and start using it. Or a tablet. It could also work on an Android tablet as well. So when we have the ability for people to use the wallet to discover trades, and in other words, what that is I want to sell 10,000 Flash to somebody for local currency. These are completely legal transactions in these countries. And what ends up happening is that person says, oh, here's someone who wants to buy those Flash. And they want to do it for this kind of a rate. And they can meet me, they're 5 miles away, and we can meet at a coffee shop in the middle. That is the goal. And as soon as we have that, which I don't think is going to be that long, probably no more than another month, you will start to see the groundswell of transactions just coming from ordinary people using Flash. The feedback from Venezuela is people love Flash because they love the speed. They like the fact that the coin is cheap and not expensive. A lot of the other coins that are fast and cheap to use, like Dash, very expensive coin. That coin uses a staking model where 60% of the coins are staked. And it's possible, depending on how they did their staking model, it might run into security problems. So we'll have to see what happens there. But there's no common enterprise to speak of. But the coins that are collected, there is some kind of a foundation or some kind of a centralized place where things are kept. We don't do that with Flash. It's all done independently. So anyway, that's the long and short of a lot of the things that are going on. There's even more going on, but I'll let you get to your questions.
Yeah, sure. And just following up on that, Chris, how does that add value to the investor? Obviously, I know how it does, but how does that going to reflect on the price of Flash once the transactions and the volume in, for example, Venezuela is starting to bump? So I guess that could be a question that people on Discord and Telegram and just in general want to know.
Well, here's the thing. Let's start with the staking model, right? So what that's probably going to do is it's going to lock up a minimum of 200 million coins. Okay, they're going to be locked up. It might be more. It might be 300 or 400 million coins by the time it's all said and done, because your votes depend on how many coins you have staked. And some people may say, well, I've got these coins, I'm just going to keep them for a year. I'll just lock them up and I'll stick them in my staking thing. That's one thing. Okay, so that's one thing that's very positive for the price. And then a lot of people who are let's say I'm at 500,000 coins, and I like what I saw what happened with ARC and with Dash. They're looking at this like, oh, this is actually a very good model because it's proven to work and it's useful to the coin. It provides something valuable. Now, the question is, how big and how fast can these things go as far as the next step, which is the human ATMs? How fast can those things go? And the answer is that as long as we have people who are willing to lend Flash coins, and for example, to get this person going in Venezuela, it was only 50,000 coins, 100,000 coins maybe max. So for them, it was a it's a grub stake. Get these people started. They'll pay an interest. It's a private lending thing where someone just wants to loan Flash to somebody, and we're getting very, very good, very positive feedback in India, because let's say that you're a tuk-tuk driver. You make about $500 a month in US dollars. If you start trading Flash, you will probably start making, based on the numbers that we're seeing from Venezuela, you will make somewhere between $500 and $1,000 a month in addition to your tuk-tuk money. So that is why it's so attractive to people. They are looking at this like, oh, I can actually make a living doing this. And guess what? There are no exchanges in India that carry the local currency because the central bank said you can't do it. But it's perfectly legal for people on the streets to go and buy and sell and trade crypto. It's just impossible for someone to police it. And quite frankly, the transaction sizes are down below anything. There's no possibility of any kind of money laundering or anything like that because the volumes are just so small. So that's why, I'm pretty excited about this. When I heard this news and I talked to this person in Venezuela on Thursday, I was really stoked about it, because this tells me that there's going to be real demand. And staking is a solution that gets you to a certain place, but in the end, mining and staking are just temporary things that are on the way to actual real transactions. To get, if you look at Bitcoin and you take the number of transactions, you take the transaction fee, and you say, how much would it cost if I had to pay a transaction fee to pay the miners the $18 million a day? It's a lot. Your transaction fees would go way up. Now, what they're hoping for is, of course, that they can get the throughput increased. And quite frankly, it's going to be difficult with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is not able to do more than about 7 to 15 transactions per second. And that's just a limitation of the kind of network that they have. So, that's why we designed our governance model and the mining model to take advantage of the proven technology and just optimize it in a way that is legal, and that we don't have, it's distributed enough and it's random enough that there's no, centralized, guaranteed this person's the only one who can mine kind of a thing. And these are people who can be in any country, and they don't have to have any special computer. They can have basic hardware and a fast connection, and they can be a miner. That's how it is. So that's really, I think that's the overview here of why people, I think, could look at the economics and say, this makes sense. And, just the staking alone, the economics make sense. And you start adding these other things where you're going to have actual real transaction volume, and now that makes a lot of sense too. So Flash decided in the early days to bypass the whole mining thing. We said, what if when Bitcoin gets to the end and there are no more coins to be issued by the mining, and it's all transaction fees, just take it there right now and get rid of the high cost of the mining and the high cost of the transaction fees. That's what we did. And this is what it looks like. So Flash, one of the engineers who's working on it said, look, if this works the way I think it's going to work, he said, this Flash is going to be one of the best blockchains on the market. That's what he said. And he's very experienced. So I was really happy to hear that too.
That's a good explanation, and I hope our listeners can really get a feel for what that is going to mean for Flash down the track. So, okay, well,
I think the best thing is when the white paper is released, for comments and whatnot, and we hope to do that this coming week. So it's not going to be that far away. We have most of the technical details are worked out, written up, and we're going through and polishing those now. We actually have gotten the graphic designer working on it. And the other thing I'm working on is to add some of the use cases and some of the models. I mean, there's some other things that are coming along too. We had someone offer to build us a circumvention system that would be powered with Flash. Now, to give people an example, what is circumvention? Circumvention is basically anti-blocking software. And what it does, and we know quite a bit about this from Unseen and from other projects that we've worked on. There are a number of people who built these things, one of which are a group of Falun Gong practitioners who are persecuted in China. And they wanted to get information across the Great Firewall in China. So how do you do that? Well, you have to have a way that people can find a hole in the net. They can find a place, and it's usually done on someone's machine. It'll take probably somewhere between 1,500 and 10,000 nodes, and they're constantly recirculating and refreshing and whatnot, and you end up with a large enough pool of these nodes, and now people can transmit text files and messages, right? Not just text files, any kind of file, but a text message. So it's not quite, you're not going to probably be able to do a phone call because the latency is going to be too high. But for things like transactions, it's going to be very important, I think, for crypto coins to be able to do this. Because you could get in some place where somebody says, we don't want you using this for whatever reason. Perfectly legal. It's your own private property. You should be able to do what you want to with it. But they just say no. And this is a way so you can get around it. If they blocked port 7107 or the other ports that Bitcoins and the other coins are using, I mean, what's going to happen? Well, the ISPs could wake up tomorrow and they could do that. You'd have to move it to another port. Okay, that's not that hard to do. You just let everybody know on some kind of message board and change your code to this code, and in a day or two, you're back up and running. But what happens when that happens every day? Now it becomes painful, and that is why you need circumvention software.